Hello, my friends. Antonio Carlos speaking. Today I bring you a story woven with secrets, masks, and dangers, hiding inside the walls of a grand estate. Before we begin, tell me, from where are you watching? Leave it in the comments, because it's always a joy to see this whole country gathered here. Now take a breath, because what happens next could change the fate of an entire family. The old Santa Rita plantation seemed asleep under a copper-colored dawn. But behind its open windows, there was more restlessness than calm. Colonel Ignacio Guimarães, known throughout the region for his stern authority, had awakened before sunrise. His eyes carried a worry heavy enough to bend a man's spine. His only daughter, young Cecilia, had been falling ill for weeks, drifting in and out of fevers, whispering strange names, crying without reason. The physician from the capital called it nothing but nervous fits. But the colonel, who distrusted easy explanations, believed the evil came from inside his own house. One silent night, he heard murmurs in the hallway, soft footsteps creeping through forbidden corridors, and by morning, Cecilia was worse. The suspicion took root. Someone meant to harm his family. But he couldn't investigate as the colonel. No one would act naturally. Fear would silence everyone. He needed to become someone invisible, someone no one paid attention to. Someone like a servant. With help from old Father Augusto, he shaved his beard, traded his fine clothes for worn garments from the storeroom, and learned to lower his shoulders like a man accustomed to obedience. In the cracked mirror, he barely recognized himself. Thus was born João, the new helper in the kitchen. The house staff barely looked at him. Perfect. In the days that followed, he watched more than he spoke. He learned of missing objects, of doors mysteriously open at night, of hushed conversations between the future lady of the house, Miss Aurea, and one of the overseers. And every time some strange occurrence took place, Cecilia's health worsened. Then, one afternoon, a newly purchased enslaved woman arrived at the estate. Her name was Dalila, young, firm-featured, eyes bright yet cautious. She carried herself with quiet strength. When Cecilia saw her for the first time, the girl approached her slowly and whispered, You smell like candea flowers." Dalila smiled, surprised. "My mother used those flowers in her hair. Maybe the wind brought a little memory with me." For the first time in weeks, Cecilia breathed calmly, but from the veranda, Miss Aurea watched the moment with cold displeasure, a bitterness sharp enough to cut through the humid air. That night, something happened that would change everything. The frogs sang loudly outside as João, Ignacio in disguise, walked down the narrow hallway with a flickering lamp. He had learned to move like a servant, but inside, every muscle was coiled with tension. Someone had been wandering the house at night, and he meant to catch them. Then he heard it, those same slow, careful footsteps heading toward Cecilia's room. He blew out the lamp and flattened himself against the wall. A shadow glided at the end of the corridor, thin, hesitant. He followed. Just as the shadow reached for Cecilia's door, a soft rustle interrupted the moment. From inside the room emerged Dalila, holding a damp cloth. "The little miss had fever again," she whispered. "I came to change the compress." The shadow retreated instantly, disappearing into the darkness. Dalila had unknowingly stopped someone from entering the child's room. Inside, Cecilia clung to Dalila's hand, as if the young woman were the only anchor keeping nightmares away. The child slept only after Dalila sang a soft, ancient African lullaby, a melody that filled the air with fragile peace. "Where did you learn that song?" João asked quietly. "My grandmother," Dalila murmured. "She said it kept bad dreams away, and people who used fear as a weapon." Those words hit the colonel like a blow. Later that night, he crossed paths with Aurea in the corridor. She looked irritated, almost offended, to see Dalila near Cecilia. "That girl is overstepping," Aurea snapped. "She belongs in the yard, not in these rooms." João bowed his head. "The child was weakening, Senora. And since when do you speak for this household?" she hissed before gliding away. Over the next days, valuable objects mysteriously appeared in Dalila's quarters, planted there like traps. Someone wanted to frame her. Someone wanted her gone. and someone kept trying to enter Cecilia's room at night. One dawn, hidden behind a staircase, Ignazio saw a delicate hand twist Cecilia's doorknob. The perfume drifting through the air, jasmine, Auria's perfume. Before he could intervene, Dalila's voice echoed softly from the darkness. "Who's there?" A dim flame lit half her face, courage burning in her eyes. Auria vanished into the shadows. Dalila looked inside the empty hallway, certain someone had been there moments before. She was right, and the colonel, heart pounding, understood the truth. This wasn't merely about jealousy. This was a plot. And his daughter was at its center. What he didn't know yet was just how deep the conspiracy ran, and how much he would need Delilah to uncover it. The big house at daybreak felt like a living organism, breathing secrets. Every room had its own rules, every footstep its own meaning. From the shadows where a servant was expected to stand, Ignazio, still wearing the skin of João, learned to read the house the way one reads a map of hidden trails. A basin flipped upside down behind the kitchen meant someone was hiding something. A porcelain vase moved closer to the window meant coded warnings. Ashes on the railing meant someone had been out late. Being disguised placed him in a position he never imagined, close enough to hear the soft breaths of his daughter as she slept, yet invisible enough to witness what truly went on inside his home. That week he discovered a torn letter tucked between the attic boards. The fragments mentioned adjustments to inheritance and debts settled through a new marriage alliance. Even burned edges couldn't hide the implication. Someone was trying to ensure that Auria's marriage would reshape the family's fortune, whether he agreed or not. Meanwhile, Dalila was slowly earning a quiet respect among the other enslaved women. She wasn't meek, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that demanded regard. When she tended to Cecilia, she spoke with a gentleness that seemed to steady the girl's trembling soul. Stories of rivers that crossed into dreams, of grandmothers who taught courage through songs, these became the child's refuge. The colonel began hearing rumors about an old family document, a will locked away in a secret alcove, that could change everything. Some claimed the will made Cecilia the sole heir, regardless of her father's marital future. If that was true, it meant someone had a lot to gain by weakening the child. Visitors began arriving more often, always under convenient excuses, dropping off provisions, checking on the family, bringing gifts. One visitor left behind a relic that vanished the next day. The staff whispered more than usual. The air thickened. One evening, Ignazio deliberately crossed paths with Auria while disguised. She gave him a long, measuring look, half disdain, half calculation. That look alone told him she sensed shifts in the house. To test who might be setting traps for Dalila, he deliberately left a silver brooch in the young woman's room. No one touched it for almost a day, but by the next morning the brooch mysteriously appeared in Cecilia's room. Another attempt to blame Dalila. More troubling, whoever planted it left behind a faint trail of greenish dust, the kind found only near the fern garden behind the house. That path was seldom walked except by Auria and a few insiders. The conspiracy wasn't just jealousy. It was orchestrated. One night the timid overseer Bento, after a cup of wine, whispered that some relatives wanted the order of things to change and were willing to bend the house's fate to secure a marriage and the land that came with it. It was becoming painfully clear this was no childish mischief. It was politics wrapped in silk. Meanwhile, Dalila and Cecilia formed a bond strong enough to crack through the gloom hovering over the child. The little girl trusted her in a way she trusted no one else. But within that fragile peace, the house kept tightening its invisible net. And Ignazio, though still hidden, felt the storm coming. The rain came heavy, washing the earth clean, but sharpening tension in the house. When it rained, people huddled in corners where conversations flowed more freely. Secrets traveled more easily under roofs, dripping with stormwater. Dalila had begun to join the nighttime gatherings in the slave quarters, small circles of women who whispered about children, work, and the strange things happening in the big house. They spoke about footprints where no one should have walked, of objects warming unnaturally as if held for too long, of leaves burned in secret. One afternoon, Dalila encountered Rosa, the former wet nurse who had been dismissed suddenly months earlier. Rosa squeezed Dalila's hand and revealed what no one had dared to say. "You're not imagining things," the older woman murmured. "There are people here who want to bend the girl's fate. They don't want her strong. They want her replaced." The words hit Dalila like thunder. Someone wanted Cecilia out of the way. Not gone, but weakened enough to justify shifting guardianship. A sickly child meant opportunity. When Ignacio heard this, rage and fear mixed in him like fire and smoke. He knew he couldn't fight this alone. He needed allies, people whose loyalty wasn't bought with silk and promises. He quietly enlisted Father Augusto, Amaro, the cook who heard everything from behind pots and pans, and Lydia, a sharp-eyed maid who recognized patterns the way others recognized faces. A silent guard formed around Cecilia, subtle enough not to alert the conspirators, but strong enough to catch them. Aurea, meanwhile, felt her future slipping through her fingers. She had been raised to believe she deserved everything: marriage, land, admiration. Seeing Cecilia grow attached to Dalila, and seeing the colonel distance himself from marriage plans, made her desperate. Desperation, in a house full of secrets, is dangerous. One night Cecilia suffered a frightening weakness. Her breath came thin, her lips pale. Dalila flew to her side, singing the ancestral lullaby, pressing herbs against her skin. The girl's trembling gradually eased until she fell into exhausted sleep. It was Dalila, not Aurea, not the doctor, who saved her that night. Ignacio watched the scene from the door, his disguise suddenly feeling like a fraud in front of so much truth. The next morning he made a decision. He would establish a silent watch around Cecilia's room. No one would enter or leave unnoticed. That night, the plan paid off. Lydia heard a metallic scrape near Cecilia's door. When she followed the sound, she saw a shadow dart away, leaving behind a handkerchief embroidered with the family's initials and a folded note inside. "Don't delay. Soon it will be too late." A warning, or a threat. Dalila held the handkerchief, her jaw tightening. Ignacio's heart hammered with the certainty someone inside the house was accelerating their plan, a plan that targeted his daughter, and the time for hiding in the shadows was running dangerously short. Morning settled over the house with an uneasy stillness. It wasn't the calm that follows a night of rain. It was heavier, almost watchful. The rumor of the embroidered handkerchief found the night before drifted through the corridors like smoke. Those who knew pretended they didn't. Those who didn't know could feel something tightening inside the big house. As João, Ignacio spent the morning carrying buckets, polishing silverware, sweeping corners. But every movement was an excuse to stay close, to listen. Aurea walked the hallways as though the floors belonged only to her. Ismenia, the stern housekeeper, grew more frantic, misplacing keys and double-locking doors. Two distant relatives had shown up to check on the family, but whispered too urgently to be casual. Pieces were moving behind the curtains. That was when Ignacio realized he needed to confirm something he had long suspected. There was a room in the big house that almost no one entered, the Hall of the Ancestors, where portraits, old trunks, and family archives gathered dust. Inside that room, he remembered, somewhere among yellowed papers and brittle ribbons, was a chest containing the original family will, the one rumored to make Cecilia the sole heir. And if the conspirators wanted Cecilia weak, then her inheritance was the motive. He waited until the house bustled with distraction, a fabric merchant arriving, bolts of cloth being carried inside, servants running up and down the stairs, and slipped into the forbidden room. The door moaned like a creature waking. Inside, stiff portraits of long-dead Guimarães watched from the walls. Dust layered over boxes, furniture, and frames like an old blanket. He searched feverishly, drawers, shelves, cabinets. Then he found it, a small locked coffer shoved behind a stack of books. He forced it open with a metal rod. Inside lay half-burned papers, not destroyed completely, as if someone had been interrupted, but enough remained to read. Mentions of land divisions, instructions for inheritance, and a clause unmistakably declaring Cecilia the primary heir, regardless of her father's marital status. Meaning no marriage could override the child's rights, meaning Aurea's family stood to gain nothing unless Cecilia's place in the house was weakened or replaced. A chill ran down his spine. Someone had tried to burn these documents recently. He was about to search deeper when footsteps approached the door, light, graceful, deliberate, and the unmistakable perfume of jasmine slipped under the crack. Aurea. He escaped through the side door just seconds before she entered. In the hallway, Dalila appeared, her expression guarded but alert. "João," she whispered. "The little miss felt dizzy again. She asked for you." He swallowed the storm within him and forced himself into character. "I'm coming." Back in Cecilia's room, the child clung weakly to Dalila's hand. Her face was pale, but her breathing steadier. "Did you bring her song, João?" she murmured. "Yes, little one," he said softly. "She's right here with you." Dalila's quiet strength filled the room, and Inácio felt something shift inside him. She wasn't merely a caretaker, she was a shield. Later, under the moonlight behind the house, he approached her. "Where did you learn that lullaby?" he asked gently. "From my grandmother," she answered. "She said it protected children from those who use fear to control." "Fear," he repeated. "And what sort of people do that?" "The ones who believe they own the future." Her answer struck him deeper than she knew. He realized then, Dalila was not just helping his daughter. She was becoming key to unraveling the truth. And Aurea was planning her next move. Night fell thick and heavy, as if the air itself held its breath. Ismenia paced the house nervously, her keys clanking like warning bells. But what troubled Inácio more was Aurea's disappearance. No one had seen her since afternoon. Dalila approached him quietly. "She spoke with her mother earlier," she said, "and then went to the garden with a face I've never seen before." "What kind of face?" he asked. "Like someone who's already decided something." Before he could respond, Cecilia's faint voice echoed from upstairs. He rushed to her room only to find it empty. Cecilia was gone. Panic surged through him. Dalila, pale, checked every corner. "She wouldn't walk off on her own," she whispered. "No," he said. "Someone took her." They searched until Lydia appeared, breathless. "A door slammed! The sewing room!" They sprinted. The sewing room door was half open. Inside, perfume. Jasmine. Aurea. There she was, dressed in a gown fit for a duchess, embroidered in gold thread, her posture regal but twisted with fury. She stood in front of Cecilia, who sat trembling in a small chair. Aurea held a small cloth-wrapped parcel. "I'm only trying to help the child," she said, her voice sharp but sugar-coated. "She must learn who commands this house." Dalila stepped forward. "She shouldn't be out of bed, please." "Silence," Aurea spat. "You don't tell me what to do." "She's only a child," Dalila replied, steady, respectful, unflinching. Aurea slowly unwrapped the parcel, revealing a glass vial. Inácio's stomach turned. It was the same tonic that worsened Cecilia's condition earlier. He had his proof. "Stop," Dalila said, voice firm. "Put it away." "Or what?" Aurea sneered. "Will you protect her from me?" Cecilia began crying. "I don't want it. I don't want it." Aurea leaned forward with the vial. That was the breaking point. Inácio stepped between them, no longer as João, no longer hiding. "Enough." The room fell silent. Aurea blinked, stunned. What did you say?" "I said enough." Dalila's eyes widened. Cecilia froze, Aurea's face drained of color. You're the colonel. Disguised." "I did what I had to do to protect my daughter." Dalila swiftly grabbed the vial from Aurea's hand and gave it to the colonel. Footsteps echoed from the hallway as servants and enslaved workers gathered, drawn by the commotion. Aurea trembled with rage, humiliation, and fear. "You don't know who you're dealing with," she hissed. "Oh, I know exactly who I'm dealing with," he replied quietly, "and this house will never be the same after tonight." The masks were gone. The storm had arrived. Colonel Inácio's revelation exploded through the big house, like lightning tearing open a dark sky. The servants gasped. The overseers froze mid-step. Even Ismenia, the iron-spined housekeeper, nearly dropped her ring of keys, but no one was more shaken than Aurea. You spied on me? She stammered, her voice trembling between rage and humiliation. I did what a father must do, the colonel replied. Dalila stood close to Cecilia, whose small hands clung to the young woman's skirt. The girl understood little, but she sensed one thing clearly. The truth had finally stepped into the light. I only wanted to help the child, Aurea insisted, though her voice cracked. With poison, the colonel shot back. With the same tonic that nearly killed her before? The accusation swallowed the room in silence. Before Aurea could respond, Bento, the timid overseer, rushed into the sewing room, almost out of breath. Colonel, there are men here, men from the road. They're asking for the future lady of the house. Aurea paled. They arrived early, she whispered, too softly for anyone but herself to hear. That was all the confirmation the colonel needed. These men, he said slowly, what do they want? Bento swallowed. They said, they're here for documents, and for the agreement. Agreement. The word cut through the air like a blade. Dalila looked at the colonel. She didn't need to speak. He could read the urgency in her eyes. Something bigger than jealousy had been unfolding behind his back. Aurea straightened her posture, drowning in pride. My family made arrangements, she said. Land divisions, dower agreements. Business, Colonel. Nothing unusual. He stepped closer. Nothing unusual. My daughter is sick, frightened, stalked at night. And you call this nothing unusual? The walls seemed to tighten around them. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed in the hallway, the front door slamming open. Ismania stumbled inside the room. Colonel, as the men forced their way in. Panic rippled through the house, servants scattered, mukamas backed against the walls, overseers tensed. Ignacio took Cecilia from Dalila's arms and held her close, feeling her small heartbeat flutter against his chest. Bring her to me, my daughter, he whispered. You're safe now. Dalila stepped beside him like a silent guardian. And then, heavy boots, rough voices, the men entered the sewing room. 3 of them, maybe 4. Hard faces, harder intentions. They stopped when they saw the colonel standing tall, not disguised, not hiding. This house belongs to me, Ignacio said, voice steady. Speak. The leader spat on the floor. We're here for the agreement the future lady promised. Land payment partnership. The agreement is void, the colonel replied. No marriage, no business. Well then, the man growled, stepping forward. We'll discuss it outside. Dalila moved first, planting herself between the men and Cecilia. You won't lay a hand on her? The leader barked a laugh. And who are you supposed to be? Someone who sees exactly what you are, Dalila answered. Her voice had no fear. The room thickened with tension. At that moment, something unexpected happened. The hallway behind the men filled, slowly, silently, with faces. The entire workforce of the estate had gathered. Mukamas, cooks, field workers, enslaved men and women, all watching, all standing as witnesses. The leader's smugness faltered. Ismania stepped forward, chin raised. The colonel is not alone, she said. Bento drew himself up. No one leaves this house with the child. The men realized they were surrounded, not by violence but by truth, by unity. There would be no intimidation tonight. The leader finally stepped back. This isn't over, he growled. Oh yes, the colonel replied quietly. It is. He held up the half-burned documents, the restored fragments of the will. Take your business elsewhere. Defeated, the men retreated. Aurea, watching her world crumble, let out a sob, not of guilt, but of loss. I just wanted my place. Dalila looked at her with a softness that surprised even the colonel. And you thought stealing it from a child would give it to you? Aurea had no answer. She was led upstairs, her rain, dreams and illusions crumbling behind her. For the first time in weeks. The house exhaled. The men disappeared into the night, leaving the air trembling behind them. Inside the big house, silence fell like dust settling after a storm. The servants stayed where they were, not out of fear but out of relief, unity, and disbelief at what they had just witnessed. Dalila knelt and opened her arms to Cecilia, who ran into her embrace. "You saved her," Ignacio told Dalila softly. "Not once, twice." Dalila lowered her eyes. "I did only what was right." He shook his head. "Sometimes doing what's right demands more courage than any sword." Cecilia clung to Dalila. "Don't leave me," the little girl whispered. Dalila stroked her hair. "I won't go anywhere unless you want me to." In the following days, a quiet revolution swept the Santa Rita plantation. The colonel abolished unjust punishments. He reorganized the work with dignity and fairness. He promoted Lydia and Amaro. He dismissed the corrupt overseers. And Dalila, the young woman who had walked into the house as a commodity, became something far more, the most trusted protector of Cecilia, treated with respect and honor. The story spread quickly through neighboring estates. The colonel who disguised himself as a servant, the enslaved woman who saved a child, the big house that trembled before the truth. People whispered it with awe, because the truth was this: the night the jasmine perfume drifted down the hallway was the night the old order died and a new one began. Dalila's voice became a symbol of strength. Cecilia regained her smile, and Ignacio learned that leadership was not measured by fear, but by the courage to kneel when needed and rise when called. From that day forward, the Santa Rita plantation was never the same.